We have this week, we're learning Achari. And even though on Shabbat we won't read Achari because it's going to be Pesach. And also next week we will read Achari. That's right. This week we won't. Let me look at this here 1 second. This is okay. That's right. So this Shabbat we won't read. This coming Shabbat, another 6 days, we won't read Achari. We'll read a special portion of. But this we will read in 2 weeks' time. Okay. So, but meanwhile, the chitat that we do this week, we learn this week's Torah portion, Achari. The Achari, this week's Torah portion, it starts off with the laws of Yom Kippur. Starts off with the laws of Yom Kippur, that Aaron goes into the Holy of Holies. 1 day a year, he goes into Yom Kippur. As we remember, a couple of weeks ago, we learned, we in Parshas Shemini, we learned about Aaron's 2 sons, his choice, beloved, holy sons, that they also went into the Holy of Holies, but they went in improperly. And there's different opinions exactly what they did improperly, but nevertheless, it was improper, and they died. Remember we learned that? 2 weeks ago, Nadav and Avihu, they went into the Holy of Holies uninvited on the first day, the opening day, first day of Nisan. First day of Nisan, they entered into the Holy of Holies, and here we are, just a few days after. We're after the anniversary of their death. So they went into the Holy of Holies, and they died. So that's what this is called, Achari, after the death of Aaron's 2 sons. So God is telling Aaron, you go into the Holy of Holies, but don't do it like your 2 sons did. And we'll learn a little bit about that. We'll go to the Torah portion. First of all, let's go to this book that we learned from before called Mitzvot HaShem, very practical. And it talks about the commandments that are found in this week's Torah portion. As you know, one of the main purposes of the Torah is to give the commandments. Jewish people have commandments. And as we have said so many times, Judaism is the only religion in the world that has commandments. Right? Other religions have rituals and customs and their heritage and holidays, whatever they have, ceremonies. But we have actual commandments that were given directly by God to every single Jew. Commandments. So most of the Torah portions, at least the ones after the Jews got out of Egypt, from Parshat Bo and onward, are talking about commandments. Commandments. That's what we read last week. Remember? The first commandment given to the Jewish people as a whole was to sanctify the month. To sanctify the month, to judge according to the size of the moon and the position of the moon, when the first day of the month is, that they should sanctify. The first commandment given to all the Jewish people. And of course, then afterwards, in the same Torah portion, is the commandment of taking the Paschal lamb, the Pesach offering, the lamb or the goat, and sacrificing it, eating it together with matzah, also another commandment. Back then, there were other commandments which didn't last, only for that generation, to put the blood on the doorposts. Okay, so let's go through in this week's Torah portion. Achari is talking about also commandments, and the commandment of the high priest going into the Holy of Holies. And some people said that this was said immediately after Aaron's sons died, in the beginning of Nisan. And God is telling him the laws, what's going to be in another half a year when he's going to go into the Holy of Holies. So let's just go through some of the commandments here, just loosely. We'll go quickly through the commandments, just so that you'll be familiar that there are commandments. Now, this Torah portion begins, as I said, with the commandment of the high priest, the holy priest, what's called the Kohen Gadol, going into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. Going in only on Yom Kippur. He goes in a few times, on that day of Yom Kippur. But that's it. He can never go in again, and no one else can ever go in, even on Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur is the only time that anyone goes in, and the only person that goes in is the high priest. And there's special qualifications that he has to have, so he won't die like his sons did. But then afterwards, there's more commandments which don't deal with this holy temple, Yom Kippur. And one of them is the commandment of ritual slaughter. If you want to eat an animal, a bird, so there's a certain way you have to slaughter, and you have to spill out the blood. Spilling out the blood. So it's one detail of slaughtering. You have to spill out the blood here. And then after that come all these sexual laws. Who it is permissible to have sexual relations with. I mean, basically, it's forbidden everybody, but the different punishments that are. It's forbidden to have sexual relations with anyone except for a man with his wife. Those are the only ones, and then not always. But some are punished more severely than others. And interesting, there's different punishments. Some are punished by stoning, some are punishment by burning. Burning was they poured hot molten lead down the person's throat. Pretty severe. But it was almost impossible to actually apply death sentences. Almost impossible. There were so many conditions that had to be met, and difficult conditions that had to be met, that it's a doubt if anybody really ever got killed. It says that, and there's a Mishnah that says one person that got killed in 7 years, the court that did a thing like that killed one person in 7 years, that was called a Beit Din Chablanit, a hanging court, a destructive court. In any case, there are these. So a person can have relations with his mother and with his father, with a male, and if he has relations with his father, then it's 2 sins. Having relations with a male and also with his father, it's another one, or with his brother. Okay, so we'll get into those. Let's have a little look and see some of the commandments. Maybe we can go through the commandments quickly. And then we can also go through the Torah portion quickly. And then tomorrow we'll spend a little more time going into what these are. So there are 2 positive commandments in this week's Torah reading. 2 positive commandments. Things that must be done. And we'll see that they're only done by the Kohen. We'll see. And there's 26 prohibitions, and that's for everybody. The prohibitions. 26 prohibitions. So let's see. First commandment, negative commandment. A Kohen cannot go into the holy temple. Kohens are the priests, right? They can't go at any time they want to into the holy temple. By the way, who is a priest? Anyone whose father is a priest. It goes through patrilial, what is it? Anyway, the father, whoever the patrial, I forgot the word. In any case, the father determines. If your father was a Kohen, you're a Kohen. You can't be elected to be a Kohen. You can't have any conditions except for your father has to be a Kohen. There are conditions that disqualify a person from being a Kohen. That disqualify. A person has to be a Kohen, and his father was a Kohen, and it has to be that his father didn't have relations with someone that was forbidden for him, and etc. Okay. What was it called? A halal. In any case, a Kohen cannot go into. This is especially talking about a regular Kohen can never go into the Holy of Holies, never in the whole rest of the year. And even the high priest, he can only go in on Yom Kippur. That's it. And he can't go in more than 4 times. And when he went in Yom Kippur, there were 4 things he went in with the incense, and he went in with blood, and he went in 4 times. And he came out. Every time he would go into the Holy of Holies, he had to change his garments. He would go into the Holy of Holies only wearing white garments. Only white. And when he came out, he would put on all the other vestments of the Kohen, got all the 8 vestments, which we talked about that when Parshas Tetzaveh, if you remember. Truma Tetzaveh. Negative commandment. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, has to do the service of Yom Kippur. Very complicated service, Yom Kippur. Positive commandment. Negative commandment. if you want to slaughter holy objects, you can't do it. And let's say you want to bring a sacrifice, you can't slaughter that animal that you designated as a sacrifice outside of the holy temple. Positive commandment. When you slaughter an animal, you have to cover the blood. Not every animal. Only birds and deers, antelope. If you slaughter a sheep or a goat or a cow, you do not have to cover the blood. It's a commandment to cover the blood. Negative commandment. Here we go. Not to come close. The commandment of slaughtering is in a different place. It's not here. Here it's just that one detail about covering the blood. And it's only in birds and what's called a chaya. Chaya are like, the antelope and deer and mountain goats or something. Negative commandment. Do not come close, hugging, kissing in a way of there could come to sexual arousal. In general, you're not supposed to, in general at all, but you're not supposed to come close to hugging, kissing any woman that is forbidden for you to, other than your wife. A person can hug and kiss his mother, yes. There's questions about your sister, if you're allowed to or not. That has to be dealt with. But in any case, any woman, any strange woman, right, your aunt, except that you cannot get married to, you're not supposed to have relations. You're not supposed to, or you intend to marry, let's put it that way. You're not allowed to kiss or hug or something like that. There are certain exceptions. There were big Sephardic rabbis, big tzaddikim, that they used to kiss women's hands, or women would kiss their hands. But these were huge, amazing, holy people that they had no other intention. They just looked and they saw a Jew. So it was okay, we're going to get into details about what this is. But this is not talking about having sexual relations. This is talking about coming close. Lo likarav le'eros, like it says, ish kol she'er basaro, lo tikravu. You're not allowed to come close to something that might lead to a forbidden sexual relationship. Now, even though it is forbidden to have a sexual relationship with a man and a man, it is permissible to hug another man. You can, because generally speaking, people are not so sick and perverted that they do homosexuality. It's a strange thing, but it's a very severe sin. Very severe sin. Besides being destructive and not having any children, not against the family and against society and against all these weird diseases, but it's also forbiddenness against the Torah. Okay, so it's nevertheless, we're talking about a man with a woman, forbidden to have any, how do you say, the endearment, there's a better word for it, hugging and kissing, and that could bring to forbidden sexual relationships. Okay, next, forbidden, it's a law from the Torah, forbidden. Maybe we'll go a little quicker. That could come close. There are many details here. We'll see, maybe we'll go tomorrow. A negative commandment, not to have sexual relationships with your father. Homosexual relationship with your father. This is in addition to the prohibition of homosexuality. Two sins. Now, a person can ask a question. So, what the punishment, of course, if there are witnesses, like we said, and he was warned beforehand. Again, in order to have somebody get killed, to apply the death penalty, as the person doing the sin has to be warned right before he does the sin, and he has to do the sin immediately after being warned. And there have to be two witnesses, and you have to warn him properly. You have to tell him what the punishment of the sin is and why it's forbidden. And then immediately he has to say, I know, I understand, and I'm doing the sin anyway, or that's why I'm doing it. And then he gets punished. If there are no witnesses or whatever, but he does it on purpose, then the punishment is what's called karet. And karet can mean several things. The person dies before he's 50, before he's 60. Okay. In any case, God doesn't want you to do it. What does this mean? A double, he, God forbid, has sexual relations with his father, so he gets punished for homosexuality as well as having two things. It says it's a lav nosaf. It's an addition. So, I mean, if he gets killed, what's going to get killed twice? So the answer is that it makes a big stain on his soul. It makes a big stain on the person's soul. Okay. Negative commandment. A person cannot have sexual relations with his mother. Even if his mother is not married to his father. He had relations with his father, had relations with some lady. She gave birth to him. And then, right, he cannot, nevertheless, he is forbidden to have relations with this lady. Next, negative commandment. You should not go have sexual relations. A man cannot have sexual relations with a wife of his father, even though it's not his mother. His father, let's say his father and his mother got divorced, his father got married to somebody else, that woman is forbidden for him forever. You never have sexual relations with him. The punishment for that, right? Even if his father was only engaged to her, even if you're right. The punishment of this is stoning. Stoning. If the person is witnesses, the stoning. Some of the punishments are going to be burning. What's a bonus stoning? Next, negative commandment. Now these are relevant now. These are relevant now. The punishments are not relevant now. But the main thing is to know that you are displeasing God. God doesn't like it. What's going to happen to us is different. How God judges things. It could be a person does all these sins, but he does one good thing, and God weighs it out. The one good thing takes away all the bad. I don't know how things are weighed out. God knows how. But one thing for sure, these are against God's will. God does not want this to be done. And God is pretty good. I mean, he keeps us alive, and he creates us, and he gives us it. So it's why spit in his face and do these things. Okay, negative commandment. Not to have sexual relations. A person can have sexual relations with his sister, whether it is sister from his father, whether it's sister from a mother, even if it's his sister, his father had relations with some strange lady, right? Some strange lady, and there's born a daughter from that, as he cannot have relations with this girl. Huh? It's not even his mother, but it's his father. His father, right, had relations with 5 different ladies, and each one of them have children, and all of those girls are forbidden for him because they're his father's daughters, and he is his father's son, so they're sisters. Forbidden. The punishment for this is also here the punishment is not so severe. Here the punishment is getting cut off, what's called being cut off. And if it's an accident, he didn't know it was forbidden. He didn't know it was his sister. So then he has to bring a chatas offering a sin offering to the temple. A negative commandment, not to have relations with the daughter of his son, his granddaughter. Negative commandment, not to have relations with his granddaughter from his daughter. Negative commandment, not to have relations with his daughter. His daughter. Again, the same thing we had before. Even if she's born from, we said that before. Negative commandment, he cannot have relations with his sister. It's called the sister, the daughter of his father, of his father's wife. What does this mean? That if she's his sister, that if she had if this woman had a daughter from someone else, then he can get married to her, even l'chadchila. So I know people like that. His father got married to a lady, That's his father is, and the lady is, she has a daughter, right? She's divorced or she's a widow, and she has a daughter. So his father can get married to this lady, and he can get married to the lady's daughter. But if his father gets married to some lady and she has a child after he gets married to her, right? After he gets, then he can't have relations with her. It says, again, if she was there before he got married, then that was okay. But if it was after father got married and then he gave birth to this girl, then she cannot have relations. I mean, that's even if he had relations with even a strange lady, he couldn't. He couldn't get the daughter of his father. Okay. If so, then so what's the purpose? What's going on over here? 1 second. A person's father had relations with a strange lady, gave birth to a girl. He can't get married to that girl. And if that girl was born from his father's new wife, then there's two sins. It's the daughter of his father, and it's also a daughter of his father's wife. Now she's married one, so that's a double. It's a double sin. Negative commandment: not to have relations with his uncle. Homosexual relation. It's uncle. I can't have homosexual relations with any man. So he says this is two sins. Two sins. If he has relations with his uncle as well, that's a double sin. All these perversions and things you see, that these are things that people like to do. These are things that people enjoy. Some people, it's the most disgusting thing in the world, but other people, they like something is the same thing as, some people say that these are all included also in the 10 Commandments. When it says lo tin oaf, when it says in the 10 Commandments, no, specifically it's talking about having relations in the 10 Commandments with a woman that's married. That's talking about. But there are some, I think we learned about this when we learned the 10 Commandments. I think it's the Sephorno. He said that this includes all of these forbidden sexual relationships. Also, 10 Commandments, homosexuality, etc. Negative commandment: not to have sexual relations with a person, can have sex with his aunt. Like it says, this is his dodato. Like it says, the wife of the brother of his father, the wife of his uncle. The wife of his uncle you cannot have. Now a man can marry his, what's it called? Niece. That's what it's called, niece. A man can marry, if a man has a brother, sister, and they have a girl child, he can marry that girl. In other words, a woman can marry her uncle, but a man cannot marry his aunt. That's what the Torah said. Why did the Torah say? That's what he said. Negative commandment: not to have relations with his son's wife. This is, of course, a double sin. Can't have relations with any married woman. And this is an additional sin. Like it says, Ervat chalatcha lo tegale. This, though, refers to even if his son dies. God forbid. A person has a son is married, gets married, and his son passes away, or his son divorces his wife. Right? You cannot get married to that wife, that widow or the divorcee of his own son. Negative commandment: a person cannot have relations with the wife of his brother. We talked about that before. Whether it's the brother from a father, brother from a mother, his aunt. The wife of his, before we were talking about the wife of your uncle, your aunt you can't have. Now we're talking about the wife of your brother. So you can't get, if she's married, there's two sins. You can't have married relations with a married woman, and you also can't have married relations with the wife of your son or the wife of your brother. Can't. It's called sister-in-law. A negative commandment. You cannot have relations with a woman and her daughter. That's a negative commandment. A person cannot have relations with a woman and her granddaughter. Negative commandment. A person cannot have relations with this is a granddaughter from his daughter's side. This is a granddaughter from his son's side. This is from his granddaughter from his, in other words, you have a son or a daughter, and they have a grandson, right? A grandson. And they have children. But the daughter, again, you have a daughter, your daughter has a daughter, you can't have relations with it. You have a son, your son gives birth to a daughter, your granddaughter, you can't have relations with your granddaughter, whether it comes from your son or your daughter. You can't have relations. Okay, there are details here, which we'll go into the details, God willing, next. Negative commandment. You cannot have relations with the sister of your wife. We already said that you can't have relations with a woman and her daughter, but that's forbidden. And also you can't have relations with your sister of your wife. But here we have an exception. Only when your wife is alive. If a man gets married to a woman and she has a sister, and that woman dies, you can get married to the sister. It's permissible. I know people that did it. They said that was the story. And it was supposed to be the story with the Taz. He wanted to get married. He was married to one daughter of the Bach, the Beit Chadash, and the Bach refused to get him the second daughter. It's a long story, but negative commandment. You cannot have relations with a woman, with your wife, when she is in the period of menstruation. Tumatok. And we learned a little bit about the laws of Nida, if you remember, last week in Parshas Metzora, that if a woman sees blood one day, it's different. And in any case, she becomes impure. And it's different, a little bit different if it's 1 day, if it's 3 days. Now we say that every woman that sees blood is like 3 days. But so anyway, it's forbidden to have relations with a woman in this time. And the laws are complicated. But this is very, very relevant to every married couple. Every married couple, the woman, as long as she's in the time of her menstruation, she has to keep a chart. And even the times when it's suspected that she could have a menstruation in that month, it's forbidden to have relations. Next, negative commandment. You cannot, okay, we finished the sexual laws. Well, sort of. This, by the way, what we're reading over here, the sexual laws over here, we read this in the Mincha prayer of Yom Kippur. In Yom Kippur, we read this. Negative commandment, it is forbidden to give your children to this weird idolatry, which was surprisingly very popular in the time of Israel, in the time of the first temple, that was called Molech. Molech was, I really don't get the whole point of the whole thing, but nevertheless, Molech was, they had these priests. It was in the first temple, there was really popular idolatry. People really got a kick out of idolatry, and they were worshiping golden calves and what was another one called Peor. They were worshiping Peor, which that was also weird. The god of Peor, they would defecate in front. That's how they served it. They would take a laxative or something and they would defecate in front of this idol. I don't know. It seems not my idea of a good time. But anyway, that's what they did back then, and I guess it was a big, they got some sort of big kick out of doing that. The Ben Ish Chai explains what it is that this whole world is really from the excrement. The pleasures of this world come from the excrement of the angels, and so they were partaking of this, the whole source of the making themselves like the angels. Okay. In any case, there was another idolatry which was called Molech, and there's a special commandment in the Torah. It's over here in this week's Torah portion. It's elsewhere also. What was it? They would light fire, a big sort of a fire, and they would sometimes they would say 2 fires. Rashi says there were 2 fires, and they would give one. If you had to have several children, you give a few of the children to the priests of this, and he would pass them. Here he says on over the fire, from one to the other. According to Rashi, it seems that he would just pass them between the 2 fires. Some say that he actually burned the children up, but I don't know. Anyways, a person that does this strange thing, for whatever reason it is, the punishment is, it's idolatry. The punishment is stoning. A negative commandment. It is forbidden. Homosexuality is forbidden. This prohibition is repeated next week also in Parshas Kadoshi. It says, "V'zachar lo tishkav mishkavei isha." This is forbidden for the active one and for the passive one. It's forbidden to have relations with a male, and forbidden for a male. For a male to have relations with a male, is forbidden for a male to have another male have relations with him. So the receiver also it's a sin. The punishment for both of them is stoning. But there has to be witnesses, right? There has to be witnesses. There has to be a warning. So you can imagine how difficult it is to actually punish one. But it is definitely really against what God wants. It's called a to'eva, disgusting. A negative commandment, not to have sexual relations with an animal, or to bring the animal, have this animal, arouse the animal to have sexual relations with you. Not you personally, but a man, woman, cannot have an animal have relations with them. If so, both of them get killed. Both of them that's called a rova and a nirba. Rova means the animal does the action, or a person has an action with the animal. I'm sorry, and then nirva means the animal that is done the action to, or the other way around. If the animal is the active one, okay, it's punishable by both sides. In other words, both the animal and the person get killed. If like I said, if there's warning and etc. The animal, even if there's no warning, because it's a shame that the animal that a Jew had relations with, everybody can point to it and say that. Negative commandment: a woman cannot bring an animal on her. Whether this is kadarka or lo kadarka. Kadarka means in the normal aperture that sexual relations are done in order to have children, and lo kadarka means in the aperture that excrement comes out of. That's called unusual. Lo kadarka, it's forbidden in any case. And that is the last commandment of this week's Torah portion. Now let's go. We have a little bit of time. That was pretty sordid, but that's life. We're dealing with reality here. Let's go over here to the okay. Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe, God spoke after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, when they came too close to God and they died. And the Ramban says that it's coming to tell you that we could do it inside, but we can save time. It's coming to tell you, what does it mean that they came too close to God? It says this is a warning to holy people like Moses. And he was telling Moses, you might think that you're close to God, and therefore you can go into the Holy of Holies whenever you want to. Says, don't think so, because the reason that the two sons of Aaron died was because they were close to God. And the HaChaim, if I'm not mistaken, second is the HaChaim, the Kli Yakar. No, it's the HaChaim. He explains that once a person becomes very holy, the Karvatam, then God is very, very exacting with him. Very exacting. So if a simple person would have just run in there, there might not have been such a big sin as if the Kohen, because they were so high people. Anyway, God is very exacting with them. That's what he explains. Here we have an interesting thing. It says, God spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they came too close to God and they died, and it doesn't say what he's told them. Then it says again, next sentence, Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, God spoke to here. He just finished saying it, didn't say anything. So anyway, here he's trying to say that's what the Ramban wants to say. Vayadaber Hashem al Moshe. That's the message. B'korvotam, that the reason they died was because they were so close to God. God expected more of them. It was very, very exacting with them. Or the other explanation is that they thought that they were so holy and high that they could just go in, they could be informal with God. And God is telling them, don't do it. The closer you are, the more you have to watch out. God spoke to Moses, don't come anytime you want to, El HaKodesh Beit LaParochas, inside of the veil unto the Holy of Holies. El Penei Kaporet, on the face of the Kaporet. The Kaporet is the covering over the ark. That's on the ark. V'lo yamut, and don't die. Ki be'anan, only in a cloud will you be able to approach the Kaporet. Let's look at Rashi. Rashi. Shalo yamut, it says you shouldn't die like your sons died, like Aaron's sons died. She'im bo, who made it, if you do try to come to the Holy of Holies whenever you want, you're going to die. Ki ba'anan, ki tamid, God says all the time, I will only appear there in amud anani, in a cloud. Ulafisha goloi shechina, because when the revelation of the Shekhinah was there, God's presence was revealed, you have to be careful, don't get too informal and come. That's the simple meaning. The Midrash means this is talking about, says that this is talking about the service of the Kohen, Gadol. You should only come under the Katoris. The only time you can come in is when there's the cloud of incense, Yom Kippur. And there was a big argument between the Tzedukim and the other regular Jews. The Tzedukim, those are what this is called the Sadducees. They were very evil people, the Sadducees, and they tried to uproot and to destroy the whole Torah, basically. And they were the enemies of what's unfortunately called the Pharisees. The Pharisees, they were the holy Jews. They were really holy Jews, and they were the ones that were anyways, the Sadducees, they were, they said, they tried to reinterpret everything in the Torah according to their own understanding. They were very big enemies of the Talmud. They were big enemies of the Talmud. And they said that the Torah had to be taken more or less literally. So there were a lot of big arguments, but one of the arguments was with the Ketoret. They said you have to light the cloud, you have to light the incense, and when you go into the Holy of Holies, you have to go in when the incense is already lit. And according to the Perushin, those are the way that it was is that the Kohen would go in and he would light the incense when he was inside. In any case, that's what he's saying. Only in the incense you should come into the Holy of Holies. Here's an interesting Rashi also. Let's go back to the first Rashi over here, where it says, God spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron. What does it have to say after the death of the two sons of Aaron for? Why? Well, he says, Ma Talmud Lomar, why does the Torah have to tell us that after the death of the two sons of Aaron, what do we care? Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah gave an example. He gave a parable, mashal, like a sick person that the doctor comes into him, and the doctor says, don't eat cold foods and don't lay down in a cold place, a place where it's cold or damp. And then the doctor comes into somebody else and says, don't eat cold food and don't lay in a cold place so that you won't die like Shmerel died. Somebody else died. No, the first person, he just gave advice not to eat cold foods or not to lay down in a cold place. That's all. The second one, he said, don't do it. And he gave him an example. Why? Because if you do it, you're going to die like your next door neighbor did. This says this is more effective on the patient. Therefore, God said to Moshe, don't die, don't go into the Holy of Holies, or tell Aaron, actually, because Aaron was the one that's going to go in the Holy of Holies. Tell Aaron, that's what he says over here. Tell Aaron, because Aaron, he became the high priest. So tell Aaron that he shouldn't go into the Holy of Holies. That should be enough. He said, no, he shouldn't go to the Holy, so he won't die like his sons died. Right, to make it, put it up. This is what Aaron should do in order to go into the Holy of Holies. He has to make these sacrifices. What are the sacrifices? A par ben bakor, a cow for a chatas, an ayil, a katon. He has to put special garments, katoned bad, kodesh yilbad. He has to put on a white, pure white garment. Some people say it's made of linen. Okay, bad, I guess, linen. And also the garments of women, they have to be white on his flesh, and an avnei bad. And there's take off all of the complicated, beautiful, the expensive garments that there are all these precious stones in it and everything, and the gold plate and everything like that. Take that all off. You have to wear simple garments. You go on. So he takes two goats for a sin offering, and he takes a ram also for another type of an offering. And Aaron sacrifices this ox that he had before. He brings forgiveness, and he takes the two goats and he puts them in front of God, in front of the tent of meeting. But the tent of meeting is the outer place, in front of the outer room where the menorah wasn't. That's called the Ohel Moed. And Aaron takes these two goats, and he throws lots. It's a special way that it's done. But in any case, he draws lots, and one of the lots comes out for God, and the other one comes out for, it's called Azazel. Azazel means a high mountain, he says. Azazel, this is a very spiked mountain that's very high. It's very high. He takes the goat up there. Aaron sacrifices one of the goats, and he makes it into what's called a sin offering. And the other one that came out with the lot, as it goes in front of God, and he takes it to this high mountain. He sends it with somebody to this high mountain, and it gets pushed off. We'll see. And Aaron sacrifices the ox that he had, the cow, the male cow, the bull, and he brings forgiveness for him, etc., for his whole family. And then he takes fire from the altar, and he also takes incense in another plate, and he goes into the Holy of Holies, and he puts the incense on the fire in front of God when he's inside. And then there's a cloud, Ananakatoris, covers over the ark, and that has to be exactly, so he has to do exactly the way it's supposed to be. If not, then he dies. It says that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, goes in, he has one bad thought, then he dies. The last 40 years, they said they tied a chain around the Kohen's leg, and they would pull him out because he would die. But they so much wanted to go in because it would bring forgiveness for all the Jewish people. You can ask a question, how come this come on? One person brings forgiveness for the Jewish people. So the answer is what's wrong if the Jewish people do sins? I mean, who says that like eating not kosher food or having improper sexual relationships? Who says that's a sin? Who says it's a sin? Right? A person has relations, God forbid, with someone that's forbidden to him. It's a big sin. Who says it's a sin? So the answer is that God says it's a sin. This is displeasing to God. You take one person and you send them into the Holy of Holies that does exactly what God wants. This rectifies all of mankind. And you can see it very clearly in the world, right? You have in the world one fellow from who knows Puerto Rico or from who knows where, he wins the boxing champion of the world, or the team that wins the gold cup or whatever it is, and something comes from Iceland or some who knows the Ivory Coast, some weird place. Ooh, all the people in the whole country, this is our man. He is elevated, he's giving us a reason to live. We are so happy, we're so overjoyed, right? It's like they're all happy because of one person. One person does this whole thing and it elevates the whole country. Lahavdil, I'm just giving an example. Here's the same thing. The Kohen is like the high priest, he's like the ideal Jew. And he goes and does all these things that at first appear to be totally ridiculous. What does he have to do? He burns incense and he sprinkles blood. We're going to see all these little details. But the idea is good. To us, maybe it seems ridiculous. But to God, it's very exact. And the same thing is, here God, he creates our circulatory. You ever learn about the circulatory system? The endocrine system, the nervous system is so tremendously complicated. And every human being and every animal has it. Now you can ask your question, why does God have to make it so complicated for it? What's the point? The answer is, it's a good thing that it works, right? A person could say, I don't want it so complicated. I'll have one vein, one artery, enough. Why do I have to have all these veins and arteries running around the place? One vein and one artery, that's finished for me. It's good enough for me. I never see them anyway. So what difference does it make to me? How many veins there are? There's 1,000, there's 1,000,000, there's one, a half of a vein. As far as I'm concerned, there can be just empty inside and just a couple of batteries, like these robots or something like that. But that's not the way God works. Anything that's alive is very complicated and alive. And so this is what's happening. This Kohen Gadol, he goes in, he gives a shock to the Jewish people, and that's it. Heals everybody. Everybody's okay. Takes away. Makes sense? Not really, but that's the fact. That's the fact. So he takes the blood, he sprinkles it 7 times on the blood, on the ark and on the inner the golden altar, and etc. Yes, and the Kippur, he sprinkles the blood, and this brings. So it says no one should be in the Ohel Moed, in the holy and the holy of holies, when he is there until he comes out, because he brings forgiveness for all of the Jewish people, and that's where we're in today. Today we'll go and look a little bit. This is the end. The second part of the work of the Kohen Gadol, of the high priest, and then we'll go and see the source of all these sexual prohibitions that we learned about today. Have a good day with Mashiach. Now, God willing, 8:15 tomorrow morning, we are learning Chassidut, beautiful mimer about the same way of going out of Egypt. We went back then. Mashiach is going to make it even bigger, and we have to participate. To know what to do is tune in tomorrow at 8:15. Have a good day, everyone. God bless you all. Hope to see you.